So when we talk about rebranding Christianity, sometimes people think what we're saying is, hey, this 2,000-year-old brand doesn't work anymore. People are walking away from it. So we need to get with a bunch of consultants and come up with a whole new thing. That 2,000-year-old thing doesn't work. Let's come up with a new thing. And that's the opposite of what we're saying. What we're saying is let's go back 2,000 years to our founder who looked at his disciples and said, okay, here's the new command. And he said, this is how people will know that you're my followers if you love people the way I've loved you. So that's the way we should be known.
Well, welcome to the Eyes on Jesus podcast with Drew and Tim. We have a special guest with us today, Jeff Jones. Jeff has served as the lead pastor of Chase Oaks Church in Dallas since 2004. Jeff is also a podcaster and an author. His latest book is Rebranding Christianity. Jeff, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's really great to get to know you guys and the work you're doing with the podcast and your churches too. So this is fun.
Awesome. Well, help our listeners fill in your bio. Anything else you'd like to add? Info about your family, that kind of stuff.
Hey, on my bio. Well, I'm an Alabama guy, so Roll Tide. And I'm passionate there. And I have adult kids who are all in the mountains. So we're a big ski family, mountain bike family. So I live in Dallas, and they let me know once they became adults that, hey, Dad, we love you guys, but we're not going to live in Dallas, and so we go to the mountains a lot and love it up there. We've got family up there. And this time of year in Dallas is just so stinking hot that in about 9 days, not that I'm counting, 9 days, I'll be up there for about 3 weeks. So
okay. Nice.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about your church.
Yeah, Chase Oaks Church is a great place. I came to the church pretty disillusioned with church years ago. And so God has used it in my life to kind of win me back over. And then I never thought I'd be, I ended up being the lead pastor of the church. That started about 20 years ago. It's a very externally focused church. We're there for people who don't go to church and to be the hands and feet of Jesus in meeting needs of the community. And so it is a blast. It's interesting being in the Christian subculture in Dallas is a unique subculture. And so we sometimes get branded, we get some friendly fire every now and then for just being a church that's focused on not church people, but that's okay. I love it. It's a very forward-leaning group of people who just want to say, hey, let's be all of who God calls us to be in this community, and let's go. So I love what I do.
That's awesome.
That's great. Tell us about your book, Rebranding Christianity. Give us like the Cliff Notes version, if you will, or the elevator pitch, and we'll dive into some details after that.
Yeah. So Rebranding Christianity is really just in response to the perception of Christianity outside of Christianity. So we're known, and we'll talk a little bit about what the brand is supposed to be, but we're known as the opposite of our brand. And we don't have to guess that. There's all kinds, whether it's Pew or Gallup or Barna or whatever, we know how Christians are viewed, and anecdotally too. And we become repulsive to a culture that we're called to reach. And I think a lot of Christians, it's easy to be defensive about that and think, oh, it's just unfair. We're treated unfairly by the media and so on. And of course, that's going to happen. But I believe Jesus gave us the responsibility to manage the brand. He said, this is how people will know you're my followers. If we're not known for that, it's on us to say, okay, we've got a problem. And it's not just a perception problem. I think it's also a product problem. Like there's been so much mission drift from who we're called to be that we need to own that, and we need to recapture that so that we can recapture a generation that we're in danger of losing or maybe are losing.
Yeah. The stakes are high.
Yeah, they are. And so that's what it's about. It's just, hey, this is happening. It's on my watch. I'm a pastor, and I can't just sit back and watch that. We need to recapture the brand and hopefully be a much more compelling force for good, an irresistible force for good in the world again.
Yeah. And there's so many variations of Christianity in the church, the way it looks. But I mean, if you were to say like, this is the brand, this is what, if you ask an unbeliever, this is what the church is, what do you think? Or have you asked people like, how would they classify what the brand of Christianity is, which I'm guessing is hard to narrow down.
Yeah. If you don't have to guess about how people view us as Christians. So In fact, if you're having a really great day and you want to ruin it, like let's say you're really feeling great and you want to get depressed, all you have to do is just Google, Gen Z and Christianity or millennials and Christianity, and you'll see the data and you'll see the departure and you'll see the perceptions. And it's, I mean, in my lifetime, Christianity has gone from being admired to tolerated to canceled to now being seen as just repulsive. I mean, beyond canceled. And, the words they use are, arrogant, mean, pushy, bigoted, that kind of thing. I mean, just from a statistical perspective, there's so many, but I'll just share one. Is that Gallup did a study back in 2001 of people in what would now be the Gen Z age group. Of course, then it was not Gen Z. It would have been, I don't know, maybe Gen X or something. But they asked that, 18 to 25-year-old age group is what they were focused on, their view of Christianity. And even those outside of Christianity, mostly had a positive view of Christianity. 67% basically said, "Hey, I may not be a Christian, but Christianity is a good thing. I mean, they do good stuff, and I'm glad those people are there." And then in 2021, 20 years later, they did the same study. Not different people, but same age group, right? So now it's Gen Z.
Yeah.
And only 37% had a positive view of Christianity of that generation, including Christian. So Christian, non-Christian, but 37%. And which is only 1% more than the amount who claim to be Christians. So
Wow.
basically, if you don't claim to be a Christian, then you believe Christianity is a negative force in the world and a terrible thing, and the world would be better without it.
Mm.
So that's just reality. That's where we're at, and you've probably heard about the great de-churching, right? And 40 million Americans have moved away from Christianity who are Christians. Well, that's massive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, if we were a company and that was happening to our perception and market share, it would be calamitous. It'd be
Yeah.
disastrous. We're way more important than that, so it's something that we've got to really take seriously and say, okay, let's figure out what's happened and let's get back on track.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that is so difficult in that shift is, you mentioned you have a statistic and study in 2001, then you look at it now, what that percentage change, it's a 20-year span. And we've seen people slowly drift from essentially a good view of Christians and Christianity and wanting to go to church. And now I feel like everyone's trying to figure out this, antidote. Everybody's trying to figure out this way, this cure to bring everybody back. And it's like, if the shift away from the church took 20 years or maybe longer, certainly getting the shift back going the other direction is not going to be something that happens overnight. It's not going to be something that happens in a few months or even a few years. This is a consistent, disciplined, long-term goal, long-term plan. And I think that's what's difficult in ministry right now is you want to find like the thing that corrects it all and brings it all back. If you just make that one post on social media, or if you just have that one sermon series, that's the thing that's going to do it.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
no, this is a lifelong, infinite kind of plan you have to put together. And what's difficult about that is that goes beyond you, and that goes even beyond your church. And then you're relying on other people and other churches and external sources. And so it's certainly something, like you said, that we've all got to view as a priority, but then all be consistent in our goal of trying to sustain and bring people back. So for your church, you've said you're for people who you wouldn't consider necessarily churchgoers. How do you find that difference as a church? How do you really go after the ones that like might have this difficult view? What's your first step in the door of saying, hey, you can trust us here, or we're a little different, or, stick this out with us? How do you lead those conversations?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in your point about, time and no easy fix is a great point. And, trust is lost so quickly and gained over time, and that's essentially what's happened to the Christian brand, so to speak, as we've we've lost trust of those we're called to reach. And because we've broken the brand promise, I mean, we were supposed to be
Right.
something and we haven't been that. And so, the book really came out of a conversation with the guy who at the time was in charge of marketing for Frito-Lay that goes to our church, and a friend of his who's a branding guru who's not a Christian. And he's considered one of the top one or two branding experts in the world. And Mike had worked with him because of Frito-Lay, and so they were friends and pulled him in. I just, hey, would he ever be open to talking about how we can regain trust of non-believers just in the Dallas area to reach the people we're called to reach? Because as you said, that's the kind of church that's why we're here. And for people 2 or 3 levels out of Christianity, how can we get to them with a different version of Christianity than they think exists? Essentially, it's just authentic Christianity, but they haven't experienced that, right? They haven't seen that. And so how can we help them do that? And when that first conversation with Dwight, he was kind of cold and, was cordial, but he said, hey, I'll consider, see if it's a good fit or whatever. And then he called about 2 weeks later and he said, oh my goodness, I've got to meet with you. I'm flying back to Dallas. Let's go to a nice
Wow.
place to eat. And I've got to meet. And he said, so when we got together at dinner, he said, so when you talked to me the first time and you laid out what you wanted to do and you want me to help you regain trust of people in the Dallas area who've lost trust in the Christian brand and all this. And he said, what I was just nice and smiling. And he said, I thought this next conversation would be, I would just simply say, it's just not a good fit. But in my mind, what would have been underneath that is he didn't say, heck no, I'm not going to work with you. It'd be immoral for me to work with you because you're the kind of people that make the world worse. You're an evangelical, you're a mega church Dallas pastor. You're the people who make the world worse. And he said, I know how to give influence to people. That's what I do. And if I give influence to the wrong people, then I make the world worse. And he said, shame on me because I violated my own principle and I judged you before I understood who you were. And he said, we vetted you. We spent time first looking at what you actually do in culture, not just what you say.
Yeah.
And I think an answer to your question of, hey, how do you do church differently? How do you do, he knew we would say good things, but
Right.
he was actually looking at what we do. And
Yeah.
so we looked at what we do in the community, the diversity of our, of our own gatherings, as well as how that spills over into doing good and engaging our culture in ways that are real and tangible and significant, not just value tagging. And then he looked at what we said and the kind of conversations we're having. And one of the ones he looked at was I was talking about power and how anytime God gives people power, it's not for the powerful, it's for the powerless. And how do we, so he couldn't believe we were having that kind of conversation, as a evangelical church. So anyway, he just said, so I've got to work with you. Like he said, the world needs to know that there's a version of Christianity like you that exists. And he's the one that said, but we're not just going to think about Dallas. We're going to think about it nationally because this needs to happen nationally.
Yeah.
And he's still not a Christian, but he helped write the book and is part of the process. And that's a whole other story. But that was really instructive for me of, man, how do we rebuild trust with people like Dwight?
Yeah.
And I think it's authentically being who God's called us to be. Like you said, over time, it's not just a quick, hey, new improved, trust us.
Trust
Is
us.
not.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite. Just trust
Yeah.
us. What
Yeah.
can go wrong, right? Trust us.
Right.
Well, and my major is in marketing, and so I appreciate the idea of branding, and I understand why it's important. And have you seen pushback though from the book and this concept of sometimes talking about like a soda company is in your book and airlines? Like, has there been a pushback like we can't compare the two? Christians like this separate island over here, and there's no like we can't use business strategy. I mean, I hate those arguments like. You can't treat it like a business and we're dealing with money. So you need some financial responsibility that you might get from maybe a worldly source of how to do this. There's a mix between, being in the world, but not of the world, but also like understanding what works for major companies and also like why the image we have as Christianity can be tarnished by our actions. So I guess my question is, what pushback have you seen and why is it important to still look at the brand and what we're portraying to others?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, there's pushback if you sneeze in Christianity right now, right?
Right.
There's always pushback, but yeah, a little bit until people understand what we're talking about. Because when you first hear brand, you think of slick, the used car salesman, that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
Once people understand, hey, a brand is just how you're known, and there's an implicit expectation and promise with that. Like even a person has a brand.
Yeah.
People who know you, what's Drew or Tim, if somebody was saying something about you and said, I was listening Drew and Tim's podcast and they said this, and I can't believe they said this. And well, if people know you, be like, I know Drew and Tim. Like, there's no way that's what he meant. So
Hmm.
because you've got a brand, right? And there's a promise that's attached to that, expectations. Everything has a brand, including organizations, including
Yeah.
church. And so that's really what we're talking about is how we're to be known. And managing that. And Jesus gave us that responsibility. So when we talk about, rebranding Christianity, sometimes people think what we're saying is, hey, this 2,000-year-old brand doesn't work anymore. People are walking away from it. So we need to get with a bunch of consultants and come up with a whole new thing. Like that 2,000-year-old thing doesn't work. Let's come up with a new thing. And that's the opposite of what we're saying. What we're saying is let's
Right.
go back 2,000 years to our founder who looked at his disciples and said, okay, here's the new command.
Yeah.
And he said, this is how people will know that you're my followers if you love people the way I've loved you. So that's the way we should be known.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to guess what our brand is. We don't have to get a consultant. Our founder, who's still very much alive and who's the one breathing and working and building his church, all it is going back to that and saying,
Yeah.
okay, and the truth is in our setting, we're known as the opposite of loving the way Jesus loved, right? We're known to be the most hateful, intolerant, mean, pushy, bigoted, arrogant, whatever people say. And Jesus gave us the responsibility. This is how people will know. So if people don't know us that way, it's on us. It's not,
Right.
we can't blame everybody else. And essentially, that's what the early Christians did. It's how they won over a skeptical pre-Christian world is by living the brand and loving the way Jesus loved and the way they did community and the way they did life and the way they did outreach and the way they engaged non-believing people in their world. And therefore, let's learn all we can from the New Testament to do that again in
Yeah.
a post-Christian world, not a pre-Christian world, but the same level of skepticism.
Yeah. And Drew and I just did an episode on rebranding our personal brand, and he rebranded his church to Yes Church from Revolution Church, right? And so we had a whole episode on that. And so we understand the importance of rebranding and when is it time, and not just to do it because it's, quote, a good idea, but actually a purpose and a vision behind it. And I think what you said, going back to the early church, what did they do? They weren't even known as Christians. They were known as followers of the way, but they were known by their fruit. The Romans would put people outside the walls that were, not useful to society, and the Christians would take them in. Like they brought everything they had together and they distributed among the poor and the needy and the widows and the orphans. And it wasn't to try to, create this brand in order to overthrow Rome. They just did it because it was what they were commanded to do. And that's why they grew, because of not only the signs and wonders and the power of the Holy Spirit, but also the love that they were showing. And that's why we have Christianity today, is because it was people that took this. But then just a simple look at church history. I mean, you look at Constantine, who used it for his advantage. You look at the Crusades, you look at the Roman Catholic Church and their abuses of it. I mean, there is this tarnishment upon this brand, if you will, upon this thing that was meant to be pure and meant to be, the ambassadors of Jesus, looking like Jesus, right? And so we have to deal with 2,000 years of kind of a mess, right?
Yeah, there's always mission drift. And, the Crusades, obviously a major, all the things that you mentioned, but same in our culture too. It's people who think they're doing the right thing by drifting away from that brand, by drifting away from that mission. The Crusaders thought they were doing the right thing by slaughtering lots of people,
Yeah.
and I was just reading about one in John Gibson's book. He's got an illustration, Bullies and Saints, of in 1099 in July, there was a worship service. I think it was July 18th or something like that. And what they were celebrating was what happened the day before. 10,000 crusaders. There was a much smaller group of Muslims who were holding Jerusalem. They crash into the walls of Jerusalem the day before. They get to the Temple Mount. They estimate anywhere from 5,000 to 20,000, mainly elderly, children, women, who were huddled, not the soldiers, but huddled on top, praying for mercy, and they got none. The Crusaders, all hyped up, killed every one of them, as much as 20,000 people. So much so that blood had filled the Temple Mount and was
Mm.
spilling. And the next day they celebrate their incredible victory as a victory for Jesus and all of that. Well, that's obviously a way extreme version of mission drift, right? But they thought they were doing the right thing. So in our culture, we've had lots of mission drift away from the basic identity that Jesus said, this is who you are, this is who you'll be. Politicization of Christianity, or the culture wars and the entering into us against them kind of vitriol and all the stuff that we've done. And some Christians are doubling down on that as we speak, right? And thinking they're doing the right thing and doing tremendous harm to the cause of Christ in the process. I do think we have to be honest about, hey, we have drifted. We're not who we're called to be. And we're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to live the way of Jesus, and we're going to be who Jesus called us to be. Our culture is so hungry for it, is the thing. I mean, we're such a polarized, divided culture. Everybody hates it. Nobody knows what to do about it. I don't think there's ever been a better time for Christians to just show a better way and, win over a skeptical world.
Yeah. It's different when you have a major corporation, let's say Coca-Cola, right? And they have this idea like, okay, let's rebrand. It's simple at that point because you need a few people on board. You need the board of directors on board, right? And then you can make those decisions. But Christianity is so fragmented. I mean, the church at large it's impossible even for us to agree on almost anything, it seems like, along denominational lines. And so this is not only a major overhaul, but like, where do you start? Where do you start with the hundreds, if not thousands of denominations and the many different church leaders that want to do their own thing or have their own platform or look a certain way? And, it seems almost impossible when you look at it that way. But I mean, I like that your book is practical. It goes back to the Bible. It goes back to what Jesus said to make it not seem so overwhelming, right?
Yeah, it is tricky, like you said, and in fact, I was just a few months ago, was in meetings, and we had a follow-up last week with the World Evangelical Alliance and they represent, hundreds of millions of Christians around the world. And the National Association of Evangelicals is in that's the US version. So they were there. And what we were talking about, what they wanted to talk about is, can the word evangelical be saved? It's been so tarnished. Can it be saved? And should we even try? Well, for them, it's a big deal because they really steward the name evangelical.
Yeah.
For me as a pastor, I don't really care, as much, but they do. And there's a lot of heritage to that name and legacy to that name. And around the world, evangelical is largely a positive thing. That's what the director of the WA said, is, hey, this is a American conversation. Just so you know, you're not speaking for the world, because around the world, evangelical means these are people who do really good things when things are going bad. In America, it means something totally different. So you've ruined it. We haven't.
Yep.
So you can use it or not, but we're going to use it. Like, we haven't tarnished the brand. But one of the things that came up is exactly what you said is, well, how can we even do this? Because evangelical is such a broad swath. It means so many things, but who speaks for evangelicals and who could actually even do that? It's so fragmented. So I think it's a great question. And the good news, and this is what I'm seeing, is that even though it's not tight like Frito-Lay or PepsiCo or a company with a board and a structure, we do have a living CEO and founder, Jesus, who is at the core of the movement even today. And he's the one who's building his church. And what I see happening, and this is what's really encouraging to me, is I see him at work in the wider church. And so there's lots of conversations like the one that we're having right now, and in the whole swath of Christianity, and I've been exposed to a lot broader spectrum of Christianity in this project than I ever thought I would be exposed to. And what I'm seeing, I would consider a movement of God. And as a pastor, I'm too quick to use words like movement and that kind of stuff because it's like fun and inspiring. So now I've learned over the years to be really careful with that word. This is a movement of God, right? And, well, I don't know, And so, But to me, how do you know it's something is a movement of God? Well, if different people who are not speaking to each other in Christianity, so they're not speaking to each other, they're not listening to the same things, talking to the same people and all that, are starting to say the exact same thing,
Yeah.
that tells me God's at work. And
Hmm.
that's what I see in this conversation, whether you call it rebranding or whatever it is, of saying,
Yeah.
hey, we're way off of who we're called to be. And let's get back to this basic idea that Jesus gave us 2,000 years ago. This is how people will
Yeah.
know you're my followers.
Hmm.
Let's simplify, just get back on mission and that's happening all over the place with different wordings here and there, different things. And certainly the emerging generation is there. And they just don't have the same hangups that my generation, for example, had. You guys are younger than me, but and so it's really cool to see the founder of Christianity and the existing CEO of Christianity caring about America still. And I think bringing correction, and that's what always happens in church history, right? You go through this mission drift, and then there's a correction that happens.
Yeah.
People kind of get back on it, and I think we're in the middle of that. And what that means is there's sort of an evangelical split. So you've got people who are much more open to that and are seeing the problem and saying, "Man, let's get back on track." And then you've got the mission drift people, like in Jesus' day, the Pharisees or whatever, but who are doubling down on the politicization of Christianity, or doubling down on culture wars, doubling down on the us versus them and all this kind of stuff, and appealing to fear of what's happening in our culture and all that. And fear creates fight or flight, and that's what's
Hmm.
happening. So it's actually growing. Like there's churches that are growing really rapidly built around that fear and what I would call mission drift. And
Hmm.
I think it will grow temporarily. It's like a rollade boat. It'll dissolve, but it's not going to pass to the next generation well. So I think we're seeing two things. We're living in interesting times because you've got people doubling
Yeah.
down on the mission drift, as well as people waking up to the mission drift and God bringing correction.
Yeah.
I was kind of going to move us to more into that. I feel like what you just described is the tension that every church leader is trying to discover, figure out, and put into motion all at the same time. So I'm with you. I do think we're in the middle of a movement. I'm seeing all across the country lead pastors, executive pastors diving into who do we really need to be? Let's get back to the basics. Let's really make sure at the end of the day that we are biblical. Let's make sure at the end of the day that we really are loving people. Let's make sure at the end of the day that we don't just talk it, but that we show it, right? I think all of that is so critical. And I absolutely love that everybody's going through that wrestling process of who do we need to be and who has Jesus called us to be. At the same time, when we market a word like love, when we try to build a word like trust with people, and the way that we do that is we're consistent in how we love. How do we, because, love means different things at different churches, like you said. If I say love, sometimes that comes with conditions at churches. And when I
Right.
say love at other churches, it just means love. And so it's just different. It's just different in where you go. So how do you as a church, as a leader, how do you say, hey, we're not just going to love, but I want to make sure the community knows that we believe in this, that we are about this. And so we want to make sure that digitally we're showing this, like through social media, like how do we market that? How do we put that we love on the front lines? And then also, like, how does that carry through to each element of even like Sunday mornings? Like when it comes to what you speak from stage, when it comes to your guest experience team, when a first time guest walks through the door, how do you encapsulate that word love, and then in all the different facets go, yeah, this is what's going to be at the forefront? That seems like such a challenge.
I appreciate what Jesus said on the external thing. He said, let your light shine before others, that they see your good works and glorify our Father in heaven. So one answer to that question with a wider community is good works that people can see, so that even people who don't know God glorify him anyway. So there's a lot there. So one, it's what are good works, and I think that's the product. And then people can see that's awareness. the product, what are genuine good works that Jesus is talking about? I think making sure that our churches are expressing the love of God in tangible, real, substantive good works in the community that people can actually see that, man, our community is way better because of the existence of this church and the
Mm,
community. So glad they're here.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to live in this community without them. I mean, who's that welcoming? Who's that diverse? Who's that sacrificial? Nobody cares about needs in the community like that group of people. That's the way we should be known. And so it's substantive good works that when people see them, it's disruptive because they're like, hey, who else does that? I was watching church during COVID with some friends who don't know Christ, and so one of the guy's girlfriends had never been exposed to Christianity really. She grew up in a part of the country where it's just not even something you'd run into.
Mhm.
And she had a very dim view of Christianity, but her boyfriend is a friend of mine. And so he knows about, they live in another state, but they started watching church online. And she was fascinated because she had no idea that there was a version of Christianity like you or us. So we were watching, our whole family was there. So there were 8 of us and then this couple. And so she's got the clickers, we're watching online church. And so during the announcements, when the announcements came on, those of us who were already Christians did what you're supposed to do, and that is not pay attention because they're announcements.
Right.
Started talking to each other, and she paused, she stops it, and she says, "Hey, would you mind not talking during this part of the service? Because it's my favorite part." And she rewinds it to the beginning of the announcements. We're chided, like, oh, we're so, okay. And she watches it. So at the end, it was at her house. So we're making dinner. I'm like saying, hey, I'm just really fascinated by what you said. You called that part of the service your favorite part.
Right.
Because I kind of thought my favorite, maybe my part would be the favorite, right? And she's like, no, I like your part too. It's just,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but reason I said that's my favorite part is that's when you share about what you actually do in the community and you
Mm.
call people to what you do in the community. And she's like, she's young, she's 24, 25. And she said, my generation does a great job of saying they care about those issues. And so we buy certain shoes or socks or whatever that gives back, or we do a lot of, sort of value tagging on social media, but we really don't do anything. But
Yeah.
your church is actually doing something, like you're moving the needle, and it's inspiring to me. And I really appreciate hearing it. So that changed the way I think about church, hey,
Yeah.
we better be talking about those things and calling people to those things because that actually gives legitimacy of those that we're trying to reach to hear anything else that we say,
Yeah.
that people see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. And I do think you have to make sure you're actually are doing substantive good work. That's the substance is so important. But then after that is the awareness, and how do we grow awareness? And we've chosen to be really proactive about that. So we decided to hire 2 branding agencies or 2 local marketing branding PR agencies to help us in the Dallas area, help grow awareness of what is happening in the
Sure.
community through our church. And it's been incredible because 2,000 years ago when Jesus was saying it, it'd be really easy, right? Because they lived in little villages. So it'd be really easy to see the good works as people were walking by and they saw, oh, I saw Tim and his family and this is what they were doing. It was amazing. But now that's not the way awareness grows. So we have media,
No.
right? We have social
Yeah.
media, we have earned media, TV and radio and all that. And those are gettable if we're intentional about how we use that. So we have people who focus on external marketing. And what I found is that all of us have people in our churches that do this for a living, and they're wondering why we've never asked them to help them.
Mhm.
'Cause they love what our churches do, and they see what our churches do, and they wonder, why don't you use media better? Like why not take PR? Why not use social media much more intentionally? Why not use the wider
Yeah.
media? Media are looking for stories to tell, and we act like we don't have anything to say. I've engaged a team of media people and PR people and communications people in our church that I could never afford to pay them. They're way too expensive for me, but they do it free, because they love it, right? And they
Yeah.
consider it a peak of what they get to be involved in. They're so thankful that they do that. And so I think whether you've got a budget for marketing and communications in a church or not, it doesn't matter. You've got some of the best people in the world right there in your church that are just waiting to be asked to help.
Yeah. And that's where people are at. They're online, and go where the people are. Don't just, sequester in your little box of a church with just the people that believe in Jesus. Like, we're called to go. That's part of the Great Commission. And that's what we often find missing, is the fact that, yeah, it's about the gospel, but it's about love, and love and the gospel go hand in hand. And Drew and I did an episode on, do we just preach the gospel? Because that's oftentimes what people say, is when you're loving somebody, they see the love, but then you don't actually tell them the whole gospel message. And oftentimes they think that's invalidated. And that's not true. Like, if you go pray for somebody, they're like, you let God deal with them after the fact. You plant the seeds and let God do what he wants with the fruit. And so it's not that we ignore the gospel, but we have to do all things in love. Otherwise, if we just do our works, we're filthy rags, clinging cymbals without love, as the Bible says. And I think a good analogy, at least for me in my business mind to think about it as we talk about brands, is the fact that when you think about all the different churches out there, we're like, yeah, but this denomination, but this does this. We understand that as pastors, but people talk about the church at large. I left the church. The church hurt me, right? And we know they're talking about a specific leader, specific place and time, specific church in a physical location, but they're using it as the entire church. And so when we talk about the brand, we're all being impacted by the people that are not representing it well, because someone is not going to be close to God now because of someone's abuse or someone's hurt or someone that didn't love them. And it's no different than like a franchise, right? If you have a well-known brand and you're going to franchise it out to thousands of locations, you're going to have a different experience in every franchise because the owner might choose to do it a little differently. Or think about it this way. I worked at a major retailer for many, many years. And if I have, let's say, 100 people in my store, but anyone can come and grab a shirt and a name badge that doesn't go through orientation, that doesn't go through my training, and they can go represent my company anywhere and look like they belong there, they're doing me a disservice. And I think when we have anybody that can claim the name Christian without the Holy Spirit actually giving them a new covenant heart, they're doing a disservice to the brand. And that's nothing that we can stop, other than to caution people that just because someone claims to be a Christian, or just because someone has a platform, or just because someone has a church, that does not mean that they are going to be showing the love of Jesus or looking like Jesus. And we've seen that time and time again, and that's how people get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And I think because of that, I think we need to be honest and own it. Like if you know the Nehemiah story, when he prays before going and rebuilding the walls, and he gives this confessional prayer of who they become and who they are, he owns it as a whole community, the sin. He doesn't say, well, God, I'm good, but and so I think the same way, I think we need to be just as honest and confessional with people in our culture that, hey, we have not been who Jesus has called us to be. Sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, that builds trust, right? And as opposed to, hey, actually, our church is pretty awesome. I don't think that's helpful. I think let people know you're awesome just by demonstrating love in real ways, and they'll see that. We use case studies in the book of different, and that's where the business guys helped me, as they wrote the case studies, but they have all these case studies of organizations that have lost trust or gotten off brand and gotten back on brand, or lost trust and gotten on trust. And one of those is Domino's Pizza, which I think is a fascinating story. Domino's Pizza was in a position, in the early 2000s, where they were known for fast pizza, but terrible pizza. And their market share was way down. Their stock price was down to like $3 or something. And it was a disaster. So they did all this work to find out what people thought about their pizza, and people said terrible things. And they could have been defensive and said, no, our pizza's good, but they didn't. Instead, they decided to just go back to the drawing board and saying, okay, they changed everything about how they approach making pizza. And then in their marketing campaign, they hired not actors, but hired real people to say things. And this was their ads, say things like, hey, Domino's Pizza is worse than the box it comes in. Things like, and they just let that go out. But then they said, you know what? That's who we've been, but no more. And this is not just new and improved. This is radically different. We don't expect you to trust us enough to buy one, so we'll give you a pizza just to try it. And it's one of the greatest turnaround stories. And I mean, in over 20 years, their market share went from tanking to they had the highest market share of anybody. Their stock price went from $3.40 to like $380, which was a bigger growth than, Apple, Microsoft, Google, all that. And, but it started with frank honesty.
Mm.
I mean, dealing with their problem, but also frank honesty about it. And I think that's where we are in wider culture. I think if we just, you know, some kind of marketing campaign is not the answer. I think
Yeah.
Right.
it's being really honest and getting back on brand and being really honest where we've been off. And what I've seen is people can handle that. And expectations are so low in culture of Christians that all you have to do is be basically nice and people will be amazed. I mean, that's the good news. People think so little of us that it doesn't take a lot to pleasantly surprise people. But I do think frank honesty is part. It's like I like he gets us, as a marketing thing. I mean, I think they're doing a good job, but my critique of that is that, well, everybody knows Jesus is a good guy, like in culture, right? And that Jesus
Mhm.
probably does get me, right?
Yeah.
And he's pretty awesome. I'm still think it's a good thing, and I think they're doing good work. But I think that absent talking about Christianity, not just Jesus, because I
Yeah.
think if people in our culture are like Jesus good, Christianity bad, at some point we're gonna have to do the Christianity thing of saying, okay, yeah, Christianity bad, but Jesus good. And obviously there's a disconnect, and
Yeah.
that's not who we want to be anymore.
That's what's led to so many people saying, "Yeah, I'm a believer, but I don't go to church."
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
it's all over the
Yeah,
place now.
I've
Yeah,
right. That's like so now you're either like, "Oh, I'm a Christian, but I haven't been to church in 10 years. Or, I'm a
Mhm.
Christian, but I don't have a community. I'm a Christian, but I have no accountability." It's like, yeah, that's not really how this whole thing's supposed to be set up. So we definitely have some work to do, and I'm with you. I see improvements. I see a movement. I'm praying that in the years to come, there's changes. And even when we hit little blips in the road, like I mean, it seems like every other week we've got a little blip that hits the radar where we, go on social media and read about another church that's either collapsed or the leadership's collapsed. I hope that there's a group of us that can be consistent and that can put the message of Jesus out and keep pointing to him. Just keep pointing to him more and more and more.
yeah,
I mean, there is power in the gospel, and I think a bad rebranding story, when you look at big brands like New Coke that tries to give people what they don't want or don't need, they're like, just give me what's real, give me what I need, and that's what we can do with the gospel. We can give people what they need, what will heal them, what will impact them for generations to come in their future. But we don't need to rebrand it in a way that's like, oh, just come to this 40 minutes. We're not going to see you the rest of the week. We're not going to have any community involvement. We're just going to give you this little check mark in your life. And for you to think you're a good Christian. I think that's the negative side of it too, is try to rebrand it into something that we're not. Just go back to the basics, go back to the gospel, go back to love God, love others. Jesus kept it very simple, right? He went from 613 laws to 2 that we need to follow, and everything else will take care of itself if we follow that, right?
yeah. And on the solution part of the book, all I had to do is plagiarize the New Testament, because Jesus and the apostles spent so much time talking about how to engage culture in a compelling way.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's all there, I mean,
Right.
John 17, to have such diverse unity that a watching world can't look away, and
Right.
churches should be the most diverse, inclusive environments. Even as we call people to a narrow path, a wide welcome to a narrow path, we should have the widest of welcomes, right? We should be the most diverse community. We should make love, like we talked about earlier, make love tangible in a way that people can see, to engage those who disagree as the most humble, the most gentle,
Yeah.
the most gracious people on the planet, and right now, if we did that, our culture is so hungry for it. They're
Yeah.
so tired of the vitriol, so tired of the polarization. I believe our culture is ripe for the church simply to be the church as the New Testament calls us to be, in a way
Yeah.
that really compelling. Dwight, that I mentioned earlier, who's the branding guy who's not a Christian, is really interesting because he summarizes the Christian brand. We talk about love the way Jesus loved and all that. And he said, my summary of the Christian brand is grace. That's what makes Christianity unique.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no other system of thought. There's no other organization. There's no other anything that has grace as its center. And he said, grace is the most powerful idea in history.
Right.
Non-Christian talking, right? And why in the world Christians cannot stay on that brand is just astounding to him. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you've got the most powerful, important brand in the world, and you
Yeah.
just can't stay on it. But if you do stay on it, you will change the world.
That's
Like
right.
it is irresistible. And that always just rings, his words just ring in my head all the time of you've got the most powerful brand in the world that is irresistible and needed and can change the world.
Yeah.
And why in the world do you keep drifting away from it? You
Yeah.
know, and of course that's the Old Testament, New Testament story, right? We just keep in church history story. So it's just time to get back on brand.
Amen. Well, that's a good reminder, Jeff. Thank you so much for coming on, and let our viewers know where they can connect with you and get your book.
Yeah, so rebrandingchristianity.org is a great place to start. We have a Rebranding Christianity podcast where we are doing what you're doing. We're talking with practitioners and different people to help us think more deeply and also do better. And so that's rebrandingchristianity.org. And some of that is just trying to help Christians get much more nuanced about issues in our culture and how to engage our culture. Christians, I mean, this is a whole other thing, but honestly, are the least nuanced right now. That's not my opinion. That's like empirical research.
Yeah.
And so we need to become much more nuanced and conversant in how we engage culture. And so that's what rebrandingchristianity.org, the podcast, is about. The book is, Amazon's the easiest way to get it.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks so much for what you're doing, what you guys are doing too. I love another way to say it, if we actually could keep our eyes on Jesus and focus on him, it really is that simple.
Yeah.
It is.
And even though that's not easy,
No.
it is simple. It's just, if we could do it, we would change our world.
Amen. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes for those things. And once again, thank you for coming on. For those listening, until next time, go with God, grow in discernment, and keep your eyes on Jesus.
Thanks for joining us on the Eyes on Jesus podcast with Drew and Tim. Don't forget to hit subscribe